Hi, good afternoon. We've got Mr. Eli Schragenheim, who is a management consultant, author, played various roles, consulted with large companies across several geographies in the world. He's written a couple of famous books. He worked alongside iconic Eli Goldratt on his theory of constraints. He co-authored a book with Dr. Eli himself called Necessity But Not Sufficient. And his famous books are Management Dilemmas, Throughput Economics, and so on. So he spends his time now consulting with companies and coaching other coaches to be experts on theory of constraints, apart from his vast body of work. And he's a board member of the TOC ICO also. So welcome, Mr. Eli, to this talk, wherein you would be sharing your insights on what it takes to turn companies around, especially in these difficult times like the one we are hit with the pandemic. So I think
Yes.
this is completely an unforeseen event all across the world. No matter which part of the world you go, you find people with masks. So irrespective of caste, color, creed, everybody is wearing a mask, which shows all of humanity is one, and we are all having the same problems. So yes, please walk us through your rich journey on how you chanced upon this particular theory of constraints from what you're doing, because I think you started off as a film director for a couple of years initially. You were a television producer director, and then you moved on to you joined Dr. Eli Goldratt himself.
Okay, in between my TV kind of career, and then I went into programming. And actually, I mean, I joined Dr. Goldratt back in the beginning of 1985 as a programmer. And the description of the job was to design a game for adults that will teach them how to think. This was the job description. And
Basically,
so,
something around cognitive, making computers think cognitively.
yeah, so it was to design really a game, a computer game. And I tell you, it was 1985.
Okay,
There
okay,
was not much of the current technology in games. So
correct,
at that time, we knew something like Pac-Man was something for young children,
correct.
but certainly not something that was kind of game for adults. And the game for adults was actually you have a plant and you need to run the plant and you need to make money.
Okay,
Uh, and to win this game, you needed to understand really the principles, not of the game, the principles of reality about how to manage different resources, how to move materials through. So this was my first job. And somewhat later, Goldratt decided that I should, because I'm creating educational tools, I should also educate with them. So I became an educator, and later I became also a consultant. And there was so much to learn because at the time I had already my MBA degree. And so I had this basic understanding of the theory of management, but then Goldratt made huge amount of changes to the basic understanding of how you manage organization, especially when there is a high level of variability and many resources and a market that behaves in the way the market wants, not the way the supplier would like. And so how do you manage all this? Huge amount of insights came through, and really this was a fascinating journey to be together with Dr. Goldratt. It was so challenging in so many ways. Uh, I mean, every time I had a meeting with Eli, and I had quite a lot, I had to tell myself that I need to be in good shape. This is not an easy thing when you are going to meet your boss, but you need to
What
be,
needs to be in good shape? Sorry to interrupt you. What needs to be in good shape?
that I need to be in good shape, because
Okay.
if I will somehow say something that is not really good logic, well, Goldratt will be all over me.
Okay.
So this was learning sometimes the hard way, but in the most effective way, I have to say.
So he was like a Steve Jobs kind of a personality, like he would yell upon people and
Um,
publicly admonish them and things like that.
he, well, he did it, I think, in a more clever way than Steve Jobs, but
Oh, okay,
yes,
okay, okay.
he was certainly a very critical, and he was truly brilliant. So he could catch me by the first half of my sentence, and he knows where I'm going. And if this is the wrong way, he is already there. He knows exactly where I'm heading. Sometimes it is frustrating, but then you start to understand how he understood and what is built up. So it was really great education. But he never ashamed any one of his people in public.
Oh, okay, okay.
And
Which
he really cared that the people around him will eventually get the best of themselves. So in many ways, he really wanted me to improve myself in the way I am, to improve myself in order to be better. And so with a quite number of people. Look, for such kind of a guy, uh, I think Eli succeeded to attract really extraordinary people around him. And it was not easy to any one of this group, but I think that the opportunity was so much appreciated. And I don't think there are many, geniuses or leaders that have this kind of quality, that the people around them, supporting them, really feel that they are getting the best of themselves by this experience. I think this was truly great experience,
okay.
and I'm doing my best to try to do something similar, not on the same level, but something similar to others,
Okay.
to managers, to consultants, to my many pupils that I have all over the world, and many of them are still in very good interaction with me.
How did you chance upon from being a management consultant, having an MBA into programming? I mean, did you have a programming background already, or you knew a bit of
Yes,
programming?
yes, I had a programming background before I met Goldratt. So
Okay.
when I applied for a job, it was for a programmer.
Oh,
Then I
okay.
sort of elevated myself, if you want,
Okay. Okay.
from programming to something else. I do not program today, but I'm still understanding. I think I have very good understanding of the IT system and the new challenges and the immense new challenges coming now from the IT front, call it, because almost any new technology of today is heavily based on IT, at least. Either
Yeah.
it is pure IT, like artificial intelligence or blockchain or anything of the new technologies coming in, or really heavily dependent on it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you like to go to the moon, I mean, you need the IT behind it. There is no doubt that the
Absolutely.
missile going there needs quite a strong IT. Uh,
True, true. And what do you think a manager in today's age and time should have as his skills? I mean, probably having the sum total of your TOC experience. What do you think it should be? Probably, as you said, all companies are inherently there is a bit of software in every company, or perhaps more of it now. because you see the Tesla car is 80-90% of software, and BMW has got so immense software inside it. So every company is going to be an IT company sooner or later. But based on your sum total of theory of constraints experience, what do you think a manager in today's age and time should have to tackle uncertainty as a market force, and then plan the journey ahead and have that bit of entrepreneurial skill to make sure that they're on top of the game? So I'm sure you would have a lot to say on the theory of constraints and all, but I'm just asking you the sum total of what do you think could be brought to the table? And because even today's Scrum and Agile practices talk a lot about the theory of constraints in their literature, having influenced the DevOps movement, the continuous integration, continuous development, deployment pipelines. So yes.
Sure, but let me say something like this for any manager with or without the IT side of it. I think right now every manager should realize that the old conflict of to change or not to change is no longer there. There is no question about it, that all companies whatsoever need to change. They need to change because the world has changed, because the COVID made something that what it created, and it will still be there when COVID-19 is out of it, and it could take quite a lot of time until this happens, but even when it's out of it, the world after it will not be exactly the same as the world before. We are not going back to 2019 ever. There will be very significant changes that will come up. So you already mentioned IT, and actually it is a question of technology, but like we said, every technology of today, at the minimum, it is based pretty much on IT. But the technology itself, it accelerated. COVID-19 accelerated very much the use of it. So the fact that instead of organizing a conference and inviting me to India to speak to all kinds of people in management in India and speak to them, which he did quite several times in the past. Right now we are speaking, and even in 5 years, in which there will be not much of a problem to take a flight to India, not a big deal. It will not be a big deal, but should we or should not we do an on-site session or Zoom or whatever software will be there, will have a very new aspect to it. So please, change will need to be because the market is going to change. Technology is here in an accelerated way that it used to be. I mean, it used to also be pretty much of acceleration in the introduction of new technologies, which certainly go quite a lot into software in many aspects that we did not have in the past, but now we have them. And now the acceleration is up there. So competition will become open again. The market leaders of 2019 will need to think a lot of what needs to change in order to be the key ones when the dust of COVID-19 will go down. There is no question about it. So there is a need to suddenly learn a lot about flexibility, about uncertainty, about how we face surprises, how we face new terms of the market. Maybe partially we have predicted it, but maybe not to everything that we could. And funny enough, it all gives huge amount of value to what I've learned from Goldratt since the middle of the 80s. Not that Goldratt predicted the plague. Okay, this I cannot say that this is true, But already there was a lot of uncertainty and changes in the market. And so he already have seen into it, and he came with a new concepts. Even the using, I mean, a word that already was used like a buffer. But the importance of a buffer in the TOC thinking and in the TOC methodology is far greater than in anything else I've seen anywhere. In a big way, and he's also very famous saying, don't optimize within the noise. This is a kind of lesson that I believe it was practically unknown. I mean, some clever people, not in TOC, maybe also realized it, that because of the uncertainty, if you want really to prove that something is working and you need this impact to be great enough so no one will ever say that this was, by chance, you was lucky. It is not luck. By the way, it's the name of one of Goldratt's books. It's not luck. Going exactly into this aspect, we are full of uncertainty, but we can do things without having to rely on luck.
Okay. Just to interrupt you, Eli, what do you mean when you said don't optimize the buffer within the noise? So unless you have clarity, so first you should understand what is a bottleneck, exploit, find it out, and then you optimize. So is that what it means? Yeah.
Look, not really. I mean, you need to identify the bottleneck. This is one very important insight. But there is another very important insight that says, look, Aaron, if your market is regularly going up and down by 5% every month without any explanations that you can really predict, plus minus 5%. It means that in order to prove improvement, I need to be at least 10% more. Because if all I can is something like 2%, and maybe this is really 2%, but it's getting lost in the normal variability that exists within the system. I like to speak, generally speaking, about uncertainty. And for me, uncertainty, everything that is included in the VUCA is for me uncertainty, including complexity, certainly variability, also ambiguity, which what I can say is this is part of what we have in life. And so we need to do changes that are significant. And any change that is nice, but is not significant, in a way, it's damaging because it occupies our management attention, which, if you like, this is what Goldratt located as the ultimate constraint, or call it the ultimate bottleneck. Okay, I don't want now to speak about the small difference between a bottleneck and a constraint. I don't know small, but there is some kind of difference. But you can understand that managers need as much as possible to exploit their ability to deal with huge amount of improvement schemes, urgent requirement for their attention, all kinds of signals coming in the market, competitors are doing all kinds, from everything this, we need to clarify the effective focus in which we do really the best that can be done, that can be analyzed, that will achieve a lot of good, almost no matter what else is happening, the fact that there are fluctuations. And please see what COVID-19 did is actually increase by much the natural level of fluctuations. because this is what is happening.
So when you say don't optimize in the noise, are you trying to say first filter the noise from the signal and have clarity and then only try to optimize? Is that what is the
Yes,
implication?
this is a big part of it, exactly what you have said. Makes
Okay.
the difference between the noise and the signal, and you look on signals that are beyond the noise, and you look on corrective actions or actions in general, maybe any kind of initiatives that are way beyond the noise.
Absolutely. So how much of it, because it takes a lot to, as you said, see the unforeseen, unless you are having a crystal ball or something like that. So companies have got used to, nobody really anticipated that 1 year ago we'll be in this state. So if they're walking their normal path, what do you think companies should actually have in their DNA that they need to have the recipe for uncertainty, ambiguity in a VUCA world? So should they keep some parallel lines of products and services ready, thinking that if somebody snuffs the life out of these products, then we have an alternative range? Or what do you think should be the plan or the roadmap for such companies?
Look, there are certain principles that they need to internalize. You already mentioned the existence of constraints. They need to understand what does it mean to overload even one resource. They need to really think, instead of being optimal, we need to have something truly working. So actually, truly good enough maybe is even better than what's called optimal, in which every change in the inputs will totally collapse my whole the whole structure that I've tried to say. We need flexibility. We need flexibility in capacity. We need flexibility in the ability of our people to understand the change and quickly change accordingly based on what happens in the market and what we have as the new ideas coming into it. So we need a very logical structure that inherently consider uncertainty as part of it. And having to have from plan B to all kinds of things that I know I can rely on people. I understand that I do not want to be really constrained with cash. So what I need to do about it, how can I have people around but still keep certain level of cash? There need to be quite a lot of thinking and ideas, exploring our capabilities on one hand, market requirements on the other hand. One of the most important things from my point of view is really to understand the market. Because frankly, I mean, Goldratt told me it many years ago, and I validated it so many times, that you go to a business that serves other businesses, so B2B kind of, and you like to understand what the people in the organization understand about the business of their clients. And too many times I see they don't think it is their business to understand the business of their clients. Huge mistake. Huge mistake. And
So before you consult with companies, you better know how are they adding value to their customers first.
Of course. And because of this, they need to understand their customers. And when this kind of COVID-19 hits, and between you and me, it hits some industries so much more than others, and there are quite a lot in the middle. So there are those who right now, actually they earn from it, and those that almost lost all their business, like the tourist sector, and there are too many in the middle. If you don't make an analysis of your clients and then you don't fully understand what are the pains of the clients, pains that probably the client does not tell you, because the client does not want to disclose their troubles. But if you can simply think about it, and then think what I know to do could solve the pain of my client. And then suddenly you get an idea that none of your competitors even think close to it. And then this is a game changer. But you need to understand what are the requirements from you. So this idea is not enough. You need, okay, I know how to satisfy, what would satisfy my client? Great, good. You know what to satisfy my client, but you need to satisfy it. So what you need to do in order to satisfy your client, what will you demand from your suppliers? Can your suppliers really meet whatever you demand from them, or you just take it that they would do whatever you ask them to do? Even here, if you don't understand the business of your suppliers, you may grossly surprised.
Absolutely. So
So
yeah, I think
there is something that is basic to create any kind of strategy of yourself should rely on understanding the market, from it gain a sort of developing what we can do to satisfy our market to a degree that we will be their choice no matter what, and we will be even to make our pricing for our advantage. But we need also to understand our suppliers because they are part of it. So the whole thing of supply chain, not just in the way of flow of the current flow. You know, I came in to realize that actually there are two critical flows in every single organization. One is a current flow of product or services that we supply to our current clients, and we, of course, are supported by our current suppliers. This is the heart of the current supply chain. At the very same time, we have initiatives to improve our flow in the future, where we think about new products, new deals, new collaborations, new ideas, inside improvement that we like to do in order to be able to deal with the market of tomorrow. This is in a way a separate flow. Many times the resources in the two flows are different, which means there are the operations of today and there are the few managers, maybe with their assistant and some more people helping them to think about the future, including technology and what software we might need, all kinds of things of this sort. Eventually, when something is ready to be introduced to the current flow, now there is a kind of the connection that even this needs to be done with utmost care, which I call it, by the way, the transition period.
okay.
Because this is a not easy transition in which I call the transition period as a period in which the old rules no longer apply, but the new rules are not yet fully understood and fully operated.
Yes.
So this is these are the times
I think
in which
Gartner in IT calls this as a dual IT, dual mode IT. So one is the systems of records, which is like, as you said, the breadwinning applications, and some people have to focus their energies on innovating stuff and creating new lines of business. So both have to go hand in hand, because one without the other will cripple down because it has to be a smooth transition.
Now you can see that all of these has a huge relevancy for what's going on today and mainly preparing for tomorrow. Kieran, there are several things that while logical, I try to predict the future. Of course, I cannot predict the future, but here is some kind of logic. Suppose at some day, maybe towards the end of 2020, COVID-19 is gone, officially gone. Most of the population is either immune, all the rest, I mean, somehow it's going. People will like to compensate themselves from many things that they have lost due to the restrictions that all governments throughout the world have put on their citizens because of this plague. And so the first thing, according to my prediction, that we will see a huge jump in the economy of almost everything, in the demand, in the requirement for almost everything. But the way I think, this will be a short-term peak in which the first reaction to, if you want, freedom, we can now breathe, we can now meet people, we can hug, and we like to go somewhere else, we like vacations, then it will go down. And then also lessons learned by so many people will suddenly come into their daily life. And so the hard times that we went have taught us something about technology and taught us something about the need to save money. Okay? Yeah. Something that, well, super rich, it was not so much their problem, but almost everybody who is not super rich suddenly realized that if he had enough money, actually this was a time that it could be used. So many businesses have learned this lesson in the most hard way. So it cannot be that even if you came out of it pretty much in peace, that after some time you will not try to rethink again what you consume and suddenly ask the question, do I really need it? Do I really want it? What exactly it serves me? New questions will become, and this will eventually make a change in almost everything that we consume, everything. So quite a lot of things, their demand will go up. But there will be things that their demand will go down. My feeling is, look, it's more than feeling. It's kind of thinking, but I still, of course, may be wrong. That in almost in every organization, if they have a variety of product, let us say from the cheapest to the most expensive, I think the cheapest will go up in demand, or at least it makes sense that the demand will go up, let us say 2023. Maybe the most expensive will stay, maybe even also go up, because when people can afford, those people who can afford, maybe they will still like to show to themselves and to others, and they can afford it, but much of the middle will go somewhat down. Don't know by how much. Please see that this is something that every organization needs to prepare to. And need to prepare to the possibility that eventually I am somewhat wrong. Okay, even this could happen. But as long as it makes sense, let us see that if this really, like we might expect, will come true, we are ready. If this will not true, we still have those kind of resources, capabilities, and state of mind that we will be able to capture it fast enough, understand that it's not, market is not going exactly where we thought, and establish ourselves there. And again, have in your mind, the competition will open itself again. And so what can we do?
Yeah, Eli, actually, based on your prediction that things are not going to be the same, as you said, pre-COVID, do you think work from home is going to be a trend in the future? Because already companies are reaping the benefits of it hugely. There's less traffic, there's
Yeah.
less pollution, probably more productivity or double productivity in the same salaries. So,
Yes,
uh,
generally speaking, I think this is what is going to happen.
okay.
But what also we need to go to happen is a very clear definition when it is good to work with at home and when people still need to meet face to face. And so I think both systems will need to co-live in a way that needs to be redefined because it's not defined now. Before we made face to face, because this was a normal way. I mean, to go by Zoom, it was also a possibility. I've used it, not with Zoom, with Skype. I've used it, I mean, in the last 20 years, quite a lot. I wrote books with Bill Detmer, who lived, I mean,
Half across
it
the
should
world.
be, I don't, 10,000 miles between where I live and where Bill Detmer lives. And we did it by email because it was in the end of the 90s that we started to collaborate on writing a book. And this at that time was relatively new to write with a co-writer and relying almost 100% on emails to go through, back and forth, back and forth. So this is possible. And by the way, what I learned in a strange way, that for me to interact with you is a little bit different than interact with someone in which I have met maybe once or twice before. I don't know why. I cannot put myself the exact differences. But to speak with someone that I met before in Zoom, I really feel like I've met him again face to face. I know the guy, I mean, I know the way he reacts, he or she, of course. I know. So suddenly this is good and the conversation is going on. Meeting new people through Zoom is probably a little bit more challenging. I leave it to more HR and psychologists to think a little bit more about it, what making the key difference. Because Kieran, I can see you. I see you now in a picture. What are the differences between we meet when we look on each other by picture and when we sit 2 meters apart, okay? So this is not a real issue, 2 meters apart, and see exactly each one, I don't know. But I have still feelings that there is some difference in it. And if there are some differences, and we come back to the work world in which there are offices and the default is to go to the office, what is the new default? Should we always meet in the office? Well, probably we are now aware, not necessarily. But not necessarily does not mean let us continue to work at home, because we also learned that there are some downsides to working at home. So how do we merge together two very different ways to work in a way that will be far more effective than before? This is one of the challenges that is waiting for us, to define it very clearly, how to do it. And of course, it will impact business trips. It will not rule them out. I believe people when there is a collaboration between two organizations, there is always a question of trust. And I cannot trust an organization, but maybe I can trust a human being. And so if I meet the CEO of the company and we'll have some kind of initiatives that for it we need a mutual relationship, I think we need to meet once, maybe twice. Probably there is no need to 20 different meetings between us, assuming our offices are at different continents. Probably not. So new schemes will need to be developed. I try to think what will be the ramification for the airlines. And there will be ramifications also for tourism, which is the other big market sector for airlines. But certainly some new shape eventually will come up along the general lines, like I said. Some face-to-face are critical and we need to understand when, and some face-to-face meetings are no longer required and they can be done with the same effectiveness using some kind of online meeting like we do now.
Okay. So continuing on this talk, actually, you were talking about Premier Foods. I couldn't attend that thing. So was that a pre-COVID client of yours, or was it, did you consult them during the COVID, the Premier Foods one?
If you speak about Premier Foods,
Yeah,
I was not involved totally in the huge implementations that went in Premier Foods.
okay.
I interviewed the CEO of Premier Food at the time who led it from a company on the verge of bankruptcy to a very successful company in which after 7.5 years, the share value of that company rocketed to 7,300% relative to the initial state. And he did it with the huge help of Eli Goldratt and his people, and his own personality, beliefs, capability, in which I wanted people to understand what does it mean. It was so much pre-COVID-19. It started, if I remember correctly, at 2004.
Oh, okay.
And in 2012, the one, Ian Visser, the one I interviewed, he left the company because he wanted to see even more challenges, even more difficult challenges to treat. Premier Food, by the way, it's a normal staple food producer in South Africa. They produce flour and bread. This is
only two varieties of products. Only two varieties.
Each one of them is a variety. Each one of them is more than one market segment, etc. This was part also of the talk, was about what you do with this, what you do with this. A question of capital investment came in because he did not want to put capital investment before he was absolutely certain that he gets everything. He draws everything from what already was there.
Okay.
And he did a beautiful job. And so I think it is a very valid story, and it is on the TOC ICO website. And so people can come and listen to this interview in order to learn, including some of the TOC learning, some of the now in perspective, the mistakes that he believes that if he would have another chance, he would do it differently this time. Not that it was bad that time, but still could be improved, could be improved. Great question, great thinkers, great thinking, and I think all this is extremely valuable. But you see, one thing I've taught myself too, that I can learn not just from my own experience, I can learn from other people's experience. By the way, people think that to learn from successes is natural and you don't want to learn from failures. Actually, it's the other way around. With failures, you can pinpoint what was wrong. You
What not to
can,
do. Yeah. True.
what was a flaw, not just what not to do. Why
Correct.
the hell I thought that this I needed to do where certainly I should not have done it. What went wrong in the flow, and so maybe it's still wrong. But if I will not put my finger on it, on the paradigm, on the flawed paradigm, not on the flawed action. The flawed action is a symptom for something else that caused it. So what was a symptom that caused it? And now once I understand what went wrong, I understand suddenly how can it impact. Maybe it's still alive and well, and I'm doing still mistakes. Maybe they are not as big as that mistake, okay? But there are still mistakes. And now when I understand the flow, I saw I am in a really new level of understanding. When it comes to success, the hard thing is to understand what was sufficient for the success. Because when you analyze a success, maybe there was 5 critical success factors to it. I think you need very carefully to analyze it, because the obvious success factors may be partially or wrong or only part of it. Now see the problem. If all I've learned out of the 5 was 4 of the 5, maybe this is a good recipe for my next failure. Because I didn't recognize that there was something else.
They say success is a bad teacher.
Succeeded not just because these were in place and in a good place, but this was missing. And they had,
Success is a bad teacher, actually, as you said. It can make you believe in skewed results.
in a great way.
Yeah, yeah.
You need very good logic to understand from success. And so it became kind of my hobby that when I interview successful people, I like to understand from their perspective where and when they went wrong. Because don't tell me that all your way was smooth. Don't tell me, because I won't believe you. So you want to trick me because you don't want me to follow your success. If you really want me to understand, I need to also know about your obstacles and failures and the time it took you to comprehend some of the things that suddenly crystallize your mind on how to go. This is a way to understand success, from the difficulties, not from what went so nicely.
Okay. Yeah, Ali, and one more thing. Based on your association with many companies whom you have consulted, who do you think, do you have a list of 4 or 5 companies who were able to brace through this pandemic quite well because they had very good systems of resiliency, processes for uncertainty, ambiguity, and all that? So do you think such companies come to your mind who are rapidly, quickly able to innovate and leapfrog through the competition?
Not so easily.
Okay, because this is not nobody really
Certainly,
anticipated
I
this.
don't want to give a list of companies.
Yeah, I mean, just
I
the
want to
top
tell
few
you,
companies which
there
might
is
come to your
so
mind.
much dependent on the personality of management, on what is the level of the ego, because I mean, people who are very confident in themselves, they can learn from other people easily because they don't look at it as a threat. But people who are not that confident in themselves, they could look at it as a threat if they listen to an insight that someone else has invented. And this is of a huge, huge, huge impact. The other thing is this is really one of the foundation of the theory of constraints, is understanding what throughput is, because it changes the mind relatively to how much cost you would like to reduce. Look, I do not belittle the value of cost and cost savings. I'm really afraid of the culture of cost savings, because when you speak with resilience, do you understand that when I have resilience, it means I have capabilities, capacity, cost centers that currently are not fully used? But whenever the need will be, we will be able to use them. Do you understand this? Because this is against the vast majority of the managerial basic paradigm, that we need to be lean in everything, that we cannot have reserves. No, you should have reserves. If you understand the nature of uncertainty, you already know that if your market going in peaks, you need to have the capability to be very good performing when there is a peak, which by definition means that when there is an off peak, you have unutilized capacity, unutilized reserves. So what? If the throughput I'm getting, the money, the net added value in money that I'm getting is far more than the cost that I need to run my system, I'm fine. If I try to reduce the cost, God forbid, if this will eventually impact that my throughput will go down, because suddenly some of my customers will be disappointed from my performance. Because at the peak time, they don't care about my peak time, my customers. Okay, they want fast response. And if they don't get it, well, maybe it's time to find somebody else who is able to meet our requirements. How to balance it? And again, I do not belittle the question that we need to cut costs when they are really not needed. But what does it mean not needed? I don't have a good plan to use them anyway. No matter what will happen, I don't need them. If I don't need them, you don't need them. But if you might need them, now you need to think.
Okay. Actually, sorry to interrupt you, Eli. You brought about this point of ego coming in the way of learning and unlearning stuff
Yes.
for a leader. So how much of that is a problem when you consult with companies, like, when you tell them to expose their pain points? A lot of people, especially in their leadership position, they say, I'm paid to do this job. So am I belittling myself by exposing my pain points in front of a consultant? So what's been your experience there? Because people don't open up, because he's paid to, the CIO, CTO is paid to do that job, and he may not open up in front of you. So how do you unearth those hidden pain points in your consulting? What are the kind of ways you bring out that story?
Look, if they put it to me on the face of the table, maybe I can answer it. Part of the problems is that they don't tell it, they just behave like it. And then, well, maybe this is my own obstacle that currently I don't know how to overcome. It is a huge obstacle, and I think you coined it right. I'm paid for it. Well, if you paid for it, you are paid for what? To try to do your job in the best way. If the best way is to consult from time to time with someone outside, with someone who is, there is a good chance that he is not trapped within the same paradigms that I'm trapped with. Because every one of us is trapped in a certain paradigm, kind of prejudice that we have, we think we know. And sometimes it needs someone from the outside of the company, outside of the culture, outside of the normal way that we did business to tell you that there is another way. I think that the way to use consultants is really dialogue. I almost despise consultants who comes to you to teach you, to tell you how you should, who bring benchmarking to you and point to you how much you are not performing well relative to this company and this company and this company. This is a huge waste. I need to understand your cause and effect in order to try to help you. And you need to criticize me because I definitely, coming to your organization, I don't have the intuition about your market and the capabilities of your people and your technology. You know so much more than me, but there are certain things that I know more than you. If we get the right dialogue, we can break the wall.
Yeah.
And then you need to understand you are still paid and rightly paid because you do real efforts to maximize the way you do your job because it is your job. And so maybe part of your job is really from time to time, not always and doing very carefully, to hire a consultant that might give you a little bit different perspective, and then let us discuss a different perspective and see how it fits, and if it fits, what will come up with from it.
Finally. Yeah, I think that's been a great conversation, Eli. So I think we are reaching close to the call here. I have two last questions for you. One is, what do you think should be the secret sauce for a consultant in his kitty when he goes around with this? As you said, one is you should have a conversational dialogue with your client to unearth their pain points. And similarly, what would be your skill set that consultants should have? And the other question would be what kind of books or literature or talks or groups that they need to join to get that vibe of how to go there and consult with people, unearth their pain points, and then help them on their journeys. So, what would be your take on that?
Look, it's a very wide kind of a question.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think it's very good.
consultants has to have the capability of getting a respectful dialogue with people who don't necessarily think the same. Because if you are the CEO of a company and I'm going and speaking with you, I cannot and should in ever don't respect the achievements that you have already achieved. I need to respect whatever you achieved. But I also need to be aware that there is most probably you can do so much more. And because of this, if I have seen a lot and I came from a certain school of thinking, which by the way, I think TOC is definitely is, it is a school of thinking. Don't just make it an application kind of thing. Also this, but mainly it is a school of thinking. And I've grasped out of the world all kinds of ideas that work in different kind of organizations. You see, Kiran, in a simple way, organization imitates the similar organization. but they don't dare to look on the ideas that happen to organizations who are vastly different. Even though the kernel or the core of the idea could be mutual, but it should be implemented in a different way. And so as a consultant, I need to have a wide picture, if you want, of the world of management. Many types of organization have some kind of look on many organizations. Like what I said, I have also learned not just from the organization I visited, but also from speaking with my pupils, with other consultants, with CEOs about their organization. So I come with something like wide generic knowledge. And then I come with someone who knows a lot on a kind of restricted area, even though it could be a very big organization, still the specific industry is something restricted to it. And try to see what can be done here that will be a breakthrough. And I am guys that looking for a breakthrough, not for small improvements. I mean, I like also small improvements, but I would not waste too much time on it. I want big improvements. Big improvements could come from ideas that come from outside, could come from analysis, could come from those courageous people who will put and say, I'm not going to endanger my organization. So maybe I will do a proof of concept before, but I need to understand the logic of what you are offering. And so then we can talk. Then we can make a really good dialogue. You know, I heard once a joke that somehow is relevant here on what is the difference between a scientist and a newspaper guy. And the scientist is one that knows more and more on less and less. And the reporter, newspaper, is exactly the opposite. Know a little bit about many. Okay? So you could treat a consultant someone who looks like he knows many organizations, but not to the deep level that the CEO and his people, here and her, and her, should know. And I think this meeting could be really powerful to think about the basics and then to go to some of the details to really think how important ideas could work so well. This is the way I look on myself and on my colleagues, consultants.
Okay. And what books do you think one should, is it more of on the job learning that comes, or like, as you said, you were quite blessed to have a personality like Dr. Eli, you worked with him. So obviously his vibes rubbed on you and his experience rubbed on you. But otherwise, what do you think people should read? Is there anything like that? Or do you suggest it's all on the field, learn on the field as you go?
First of all, people can read books and they can also learn from what they do. And I think they should do both, period. Certainly, I would start with the goal because really it has all the elements of thinking exactly about that. And if you look on the goal, you could see about the conversations between Jonah and Alex in the book. As Jonah does not go into the details, it's up to Alex, who is a CEO, is a plant manager, not a CEO, to go into these. But these kind of relationships, a lot can be learned from it. One thing on top of it that I've learned is really try as much as possible not to intimidate the people I'm talking to. I'm not coming from a superior level. From the doing things of me, they are so much superior to me. So I cannot, should not. But I don't want to belittle myself, having this wide acknowledgement of quite a lot of organizations, lot of situations, understanding cause and effect in a more general way could be so much blessing to do this kind of marriage when it works. And I think most of the good colleagues are doing it. You see, Eli Goldratt himself was so brilliant that some people were really afraid of him. And when I saw this, I sort of told to myself that in a way it's good that I'm the other Eli. I'm not Eli Goldratt, I'm Eli Schragenheim. This is something else. Not so big, not so intimidating, but still, excuse me for saying that myself, I can be very valuable.
Absolutely. Great. So I think I just have one more last question. I told you, but I'm going back on my words. So how much of the TOC do you think actually has been applied to IT companies from your perspective? I'm sure a lot of companies are talking about for DevOps and continuous delivery, continuous production. It's part of the literature. But what's in your experience, any direct use cases of IT companies having implemented TOC directly? So can you share some experience on that?
Look, quite some TOC companies have implemented what we call CCPM, which is the application for managing projects. But this is only partial for IT, because IT...
Which company makes that product, Eli, or that CCPA?
No, it's part of TOC, and there are implementation of TOC in IT.
Oh, okay.
But to me, this is part of the thing, not the most important one, certainly because also what we see in IT, the amount of projects, what I call a project, is not all that big, because in a way, IT company is making a project and then making quite a lot of adding more and more features to it. And what can be done? I mean, there is a book written lately, I think Tame the Flow, I think it's called, which is really coming quite a lot from IT, and at least looks on agile.
The Phoenix project? Are you talking about the Phoenix
No,
project?
no, I'm not speaking about the Phoenix project, which is
Gene Club.
I call it Tame the Flow. This is the name of a book by another TOC person.
I'll probably offline ping you.
Independent. Okay, but he comes from software and he speaks more general speaking, about the situation with knowledgeable companies, in which the knowledge is the key. And what can be taken from TOC to tame the flow, actually manage how they can eventually pull more out of the system, because what happens with IT and similar companies is they choke themselves to death. They put too many things into. So Agile try to solve it in a certain way and maybe could be used better. But there is another thing that I think did not enter enough and should be, generally speaking, it is called Goldratt 6 question about the value of new technology. Generally speaking, I think those 6 questions is actually asking you, when you have the idea for a new feature or new requirement of a client, how do you check it? What is the real value coming from it? Why? Because between you and me, all those IT are actually bombarded by new requirements. So for me, the first question is how I look on the huge new requirements and pinpoint the requirements that really will add value. Because there are so many requirements that we will do it on the expense of other requirements, and eventually not much value coming from it, even though the client asks. So what?
Okay, I think so. I just saw that Eli is the 6 new technology questions. So the name of the book, what was that thing? New Pathways, or what was that?
What? My
Uh,
book?
yeah, no. The book that you said, there's a TOC consultant who wrote about IT, Eli.
Tame the Flow, I
How
believe.
Thames? How do you pronounce
Tame,
that?
T-A-M-E, tame.
Okay.
Do,
Okay.
like you like to tame your dog.
Okay. Tame the flow. Tame the flow.
Tame the flow.
Okay.
I'm sorry about my accent, okay?
Yeah. There is a
We all
little bit
have
of.
accents based on where we were born, you know.
Sure, very true. I mean, but it's not very heavy though. It's very neutral, not
Okay,
very heavy, but in some places, yeah, it is the thing. No, not a problem. So I think thanks, Eli, very much, and for your
thank you.
conversation and for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. Have a great weekend, and I'll surely be in touch with you on LinkedIn to catch up with you on other things. And
Good.
what is the mail ID that I need to share with you? Yeah, share for people here. I think I'll probably take it up from your website and hook it for people who would be interested in getting a touch on the TOC and things like that.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Kieran.
Thanks. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.